Now I'm very excited to introduce our speaker for tonight. Molly Tam-Ulevich is the Michigan State Director of the Humane Society of the United States and has been an advocate for animals for more than 13 years. She received her master's degree from Michigan State University with a focus in human animal studies. In addition to her work with the Humane Society of the United States, she currently serves on the board of directors of Attorneys for Animals. And Molly, take it away. Thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you. That was a very nice introduction, Olivia. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. I like for pushing through your Zoom fatigue to be here tonight. One great thing is that my kittens just found the toy that makes noises like a woodland creature. So I might have to step away if they don't tire of that really quick. So my apologies. I am speaking tonight after, Olivia and I had a brief correspondence about what it is that I do every day, which is advocate for animals in politics. And we were just kind of communicating about why it's important and what some of the barriers are for people to participate in the political process, because sometimes it can be really intimidating, and there are a lot of steps. People don't necessarily know where to go with it. And then even when you know the forum that you want to participate in, there's a intimidation factor sometimes, because a lot of people hear, a senator or a representative, and they're going to have this meeting with them, or they're going to provide public comment. And it can be a very intimidating process with people who aren't always friendly. And so what I wanted to do is just break down some of the basic steps to participating politically for animals. And this can be applied to any cause that you're passionate about. To talk a little bit about some strategies to be most effective, to talk about the importance of lobbying, which is what I do every day. So what I'm going to do is share a brief presentation with you, and then I'm going to share some video examples. If I'd known you were going to be here, maybe I would have put up a video of you. Maybe I still will. And then we'll have time for questions. So I am going to start sharing my screen. Just give me one moment. Okay, animals, politics, and you. Why is this important? So I'm just going to preface this by saying I am not a politician. I got my master's degree in human animal studies from Michigan State University. At heart, I am kind of a nerd and an academic. I'm an activist. I've been, vegan for 14 years. I made that decision because of the animals. And to be honest with you, I burned out of animal welfare work for about 4 years in my 20s because it was stressful. I didn't necessarily have the coping skills that I needed. I was overwhelmed. I took on too many projects, and I just needed to take a break. And so in the interim, I worked at Whole Foods. I managed low-income senior housing. I did a variety of jobs, all while trying to stay at least tangentially attached to my passion, which is animal welfare. And like many people, the Humane Society of the United States was a dream job for me, right? It was kind of the highest caliber organization that I could imagine. And when I had the opportunity to become the Michigan State Director, it was a dream come true. And it was also a huge learning curve, because what's entailed in being a full-time animal advocate in the political sphere means that you have to really understand the dynamics that go on up at our state capitol and become incredibly literate in both the political process and your own state. So one of the things that surprised me, and one of the things that I have seen over the last 3 years as Michigan State Director, is that there is a real need for lobbying for animals. And I know lobbying is kind of a dirty word. So what we're going to do is go through some basics about what that means. What does it mean to be a citizen lobbyist? What are some of the barriers that people encounter when they try to stick up for animals, when they try to lobby for animals, and ways that you can overcome those barriers and apply them to any cause that you're passionate about. So what's lobbying? In short, lobbying is just asking for what you want. So your pets are lobbying you every single day when you get out of bed and your cat is like meowing and like rubbing up against your leg and looking at you so cute. Like they're lobbying, your kids are lobbying. We're always lobbying because we are asking for what it is that we want and seeking to influence. And so when we want to influence someone in a position of authority, so an elected official, for example, or say your local grocery store doesn't carry any plant-based options and you really want to convince them otherwise, what you're doing is a form of lobbying. And so a way to think of it, I think, and there is lots of manipulation and there are reasons for that negative connotation, which we're going to get to later, is that anyone in a position of authority, whether that's an elected official or the grocery store manager, they're there because of their personal expertise or their personal reasons. They were elected on a platform of education or criminal justice reform, or maybe they were just a very good manager and they've gotten to this position. But they're not a subject area expert in everything. And so as citizen lobbyists, as people who live in someone's district or patronizing someone's business, we have the opportunity to share our subject area expertise with someone who's able to make a decision that could impact something larger. And so that's how I like to think of lobbying, because I think it's important to assume positive intent a lot of the time. Sometimes people just don't know what we know. I certainly don't know everything. I don't think there's anyone in the world who does. And the kind of beauty of having all types of people in this world is that we all think differently and have different experiences. So as a lobbyist, in whatever capacity you're working in, you are taking what it is that you're passionate about, what aligns with your values and what you know something about, and you're sharing that information with someone who might have the opportunity to make a more impactful decision once they know what you know. And so that's what I think that in animal advocacy, it's really important because the animals cannot share anything about their lived experience with anyone who's a decision maker. And that's why it's so important that we become lobbyists on behalf of animals and we lend their voice to what's going on with them. And so there are different kinds of lobbyists. And so when you're up in Lansing, and I know a lot of us have had that experience where we've, watched a TV show or a movie and we've all said, oh, everybody is influenced by corporations and it's so corrupt. Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong there, right? But I think it's important to understand how all of these things fit together to have a better understanding of the political system as a whole. And again, I'm saying this as someone who had kind of a tenuous grasp on politics before I started this job. I read the paper, I had called my representative and senator, I'd written letters to the editor, but it wasn't until I was actually in Lansing every day, seeing the way that relationships get built and the way that issues get discussed that I realized the importance of really reaching out of our bubble and into the political sphere. So just a general overview. In state politics, you have contract lobbyists, right? And those are professional lobbyists. They usually work for a firm and they represent multiple different clients and they're known quantities to elected officials. The firms are usually located very close to the Capitol, to the House and Senate office building. They have rooms for meeting. Elected officials go into those rooms and have conversations with the lobbyists. They sometimes go, out for dinner, for drinks, on vacation, to conferences. Like, they all know each other very well. And so when a lobbyist takes on a client, the lobbyist's benefit to that client is the relationships that they've created with elected officials over the years. And so to be transparent, I have a lobbyist. I have a contract lobbyist in Lansing. A lot of nonprofits do. A lot of for-profit companies do as well. And as complicated as the political system is, you can guarantee that everyone who opposes animal interests also has at least one contract lobbyist, which means that For every lobbyist who's talking to an elected official about how to create, better structures outside for dogs who live outdoors, the puppy mill industry, the trophy hunting industry, factory farms, animal entertainment industry, they also have professional known quantities who are visiting elected officials every day, taking them out to dinner and talking to them about these issues. That is an inner circle of influence. And it's important that all of us know that that exists, because we have to know that you can't count on someone else doing that work and calling in on behalf of whatever cause you're working on, because there's already going to be somebody who has a lot of influence, who is probably taking the opposite stance and is well resourced and is already involved with a politician talking about that bill. So that's why it's so important to get involved, because there is this whole infrastructure already in place of contract lobbyists who are kind of doing their communication every single day up at the Capitol. And then you have somebody like me. I'm an issue-specific lobbyist. So I go up to Lansing and I talk to elected officials about animal welfare issues. They might email me or call me if there is an issue that they want to know more about, sometimes if they like me, right? And as a representative of an organization that works on issues of factory farming and opposing trophy hunting, there are very powerful interest groups that really don't want to see me come up there. And I don't, my voice doesn't necessarily carry weight, because I'm the animal person and I'm contrary to the interests of some other animal industries up in Lansing. But it's my job to represent a single issue and to consistently represent the animal's point of view. And you have people who are doing this kind of work for all kinds of organizations, and they'll make their way up there. Some organizations have one or two people who do this kind of policy work, and maybe they travel state to state, right? Or sometimes there's somebody like in HSUS, most states have a state director who is up at the state house, keeping an eye on the bills to make sure that whenever there's a bill that's good for animals, we can weigh in and try to support. And when there's a bill that's bad for animals, we can oppose. And we are so fortunate in Michigan to have attorneys for animals as well in the state. And I know B and Don are on this call, but Attorneys for Animals is a really wonderful Michigan-based animal advocacy organization that easily organizes all of the bills in Michigan that are related to animals, votes on a position, gives a brief description, and allows people the opportunity to see what's going on in Lansing that pertains to animals. And then there's you, the citizen lobbyist. And this is a really important role. And this is where I think we need to see more involvement from our community, from our animal welfare community. Because if politicians don't know that animal issues are important to you, they're not going to talk about them, sign on to bills, helping them, stand up to defeat them, or mention it in their campaigns. A lot of us are very active on social media, and we're part of all of these Facebook groups that talk about, you know, a story here or there, you know, I can't believe that this happened or this happened, and they share some rescue story or whatever. And that's all great and important, but it's like a bubble like this. And then over here, you have the bubble of the elected officials in your area, and they will never meet because they're never going to know that you're over here getting outraged about something. You know, they're never going to join, unless they're vegan, right? They're never going to join Vegan Detroit or Vegan Kalamazoo or the like Michigan Humane Foster Volunteers groups. You know, some of these folks are big supporters of their own local shelter, but when something happens that we're all really excited about, like remember when the Impossible Whopper, for example, came out at Burger King, and you know, like we all went crazy and we couldn't believe we could get it, you know, everywhere. Okay, that's awesome, but very little mainstream press might have picked up on it for a second, and then it went away. And so the fact that Southeast Michigan is this thriving economy with all these plant-based businesses, and that, you know, we're an agriculture state where more and more people are switching to a more plant-fortified diet, the folks in charge don't necessarily know that unless you're calling in. And so I hate to say the squeaky wheel gets the grease, but it's so true. If you don't forge a relationship with that elected official and ask to sit down with them and talk to them about these issues, they just aren't going to know that you're there. You're going to be a vote, and that's about it. And so as their constituent, you are their boss, you're the person electing them. And yes, there might be other factors that cause them to not pay attention to your opinion, like that. They're not always going to listen to what you have to say, but your opinion as a constituent, as a resident of that district, is going to carry so much weight. And so if you and your friend and maybe the friend who owns a cafe or owns a business or a law enforcement officer, anybody that you know in the community can call in, once they start getting, 5, 10, 15 calls about an issue, they start to pay attention. And the person who sits at the front desk and monitors the email and the person who helps to write policy, they start to pay attention when more people call and write in. So you individually need to establish a relationship with that office, not just negative, not just complaining, but just a relationship, to state your priorities, to share your expertise, and to get other people to call in too, just so that these issues show up on people's radar. And again, this could be any political issue that you care about, but it really is a matter of numbers and frequency that you call, so that they remember who you are and associate you with the cause that's important to you. So lobbying, it builds relationships. It debunks stereotypes because, we've all been called the crazy vegan, the angry animal advocate, the emotional, they love to use that word emotional and try to dismiss people that way. But it's really hard to do that when you sit down with someone face to face and they can't just stereotype you. They see that you're an actual person, you live in their district, and you have the views that maybe they've mocked before or dismissed as not really relevant. You increase the political literacy of our movement, because when you involve yourself with the folks who are your elected officials, you're inspiring others to do that. And I'm going to show you how to potentially do that later on. You deliver a visual message. If you show up and you say, I'm really concerned about the treatment of animals who are left outside 24/7 in our district, and I just want to show you some pictures of what I've seen, they can't look away. If you send them a link and they don't watch the link, okay, I get it, right? But you've made that effort, you've made that attempt. Usually their legislative aides are going to watch the materials that constituents send them. If they were to encounter so much of the media that changed our views about animals, they might just pass it by like so many people do. But if you sit down with them and you say, this matters to me and you represent me, I'd like you to see this thing that matters to me, and I'd like to know what you're going to do to help. It's really hard to say no to that, because they want you to like them, they want you to vote for them, and they also want to be polite. These aren't bad people. They're people who got into this industry because they really do want to make a difference, whether you agree with that difference or not. Most people really do want to learn and know more. When you do this kind of outreach, you're sharing inspiration and hope with other people. Like when there's a win, oh my gosh, it is so great. The energy is palpable. We see so much depressing stuff all the time. We're always like, gosh, I wish that we could score this victory or this victory. And how many times do we share bad stories about something awful that happened on social media? And we don't have something to celebrate. But when we make that connection, and maybe your representative wants to sponsor a bill, that's amazing. It inspires the whole community. So you want to keep it. And then it's also important to ask for something specific, right? So my policy, when somebody's elected, call them up, write them an email, congratulate them, let them know you live in the district, and then say, one of the things that really matters to me is animal welfare. Would you be willing to talk to me about it sometime? And then when you go into their office, maybe pick 1 or 2 things that really matter to you, present an article, talk about the science, talk about your experience, and keep it specific. Do you want them to support a bill? Do you want them to introduce a bill? Do you want them to do some research? Just make sure that you know what you're asking them to do when you go in. Just make sure, and they also, that they associate you with this issue, they know who you are, and that they have a positive association. I'm sorry, I should have warned you, there are some graphic pictures in here. But this is a result of collaboration and lobbying. And I wanted to share this because this just happened this week. And as sad as this picture is, this actually represents a huge victory in Michigan. And I talked to one of the volunteers who worked on this initiative. She put in 300 hours of lobbying to get this victory. So on Tuesday night, the Kalamazoo County Commission voted to condemn wildlife killing competitions in Michigan and ask the state of Michigan to ban them. Wildlife killing competitions are events where native carnivores are killed over a specific period of time for cash and prizes. They are not hunting, they're a blood sport. It does nothing to control the predator population. They're outdated, they're out of touch, they're cruel. And because Michigan's elected officials and appointed officials who govern wildlife will not take a stand against this kind of cruelty, a volunteer who I work with approached her county commissioners and said, I want you to take a stand against these practices. And she worked with them and contacted them over and over. She didn't give up until she found someone who was willing to sponsor that proclamation. She got in touch with me. We talked about how this kind of work has snowballed across the country, how other states are banning these practices, how Michigan has been very opaque, even talking about this issue, how frustrating it's been to not see any action. And then we each spent hours and hours composing letters, finding coalition partners of other organizations who support this that would lend their logo to this, asking people to reach out to county officials, asking people to testify, to call in, to leave messages. And on Tuesday night, 39 advocates called in to ask Kalamazoo County to proclaim that they condemn wildlife killing competitions and ask the state to ban them. And now, is this a symbolic victory? Absolutely. There's no ban on them. There's no way these are banned because of this. But this is the first time that there has been forward movement on a wildlife issue and an egregious cruelty issue for wildlife in a very, very long time. And it's only because advocates took the time to not just post on social media, but to reach out, leave messages, leave comments, and call elected officials directly. That's a lot of hours and a lot of people, but ultimately it led to a huge victory and a big step forward. And I just want to say lobbying, I know that there's not one particular way to be an advocate, right? I think that we all build off of each other. So there are protests that work, and there are direct actions that work, and there is lobbying that works. I personally, because the law will impact so many animals, so it has the potential to impact millions of animals with one law. This is where I like to put my effort. But sometimes we can build off of each other. Sometimes if people are really angry and they're making a, kind of a public scene, I can be the one who goes to an elected official and says, hey, people are really upset about this. Have you thought about legislating for it? Or, hey, if you don't want this to keep happening, you could come up with a moderate solution that might fix this issue. And then sometimes they sabotage each other. And I can think of a state right now that was working really hard in a very hostile legislature to make animal torture a felony. They were one of the only states that didn't have a felony charge for animal torture. Well, just so happened that there was a big public direct action where a bunch of farm animals were stolen from a high profile farm. And because of that, and because there was no communication or distinguishing between animal welfare groups in that legislature, my colleague was lumped in with all the other advocates, and animal torture is not a felony because they decided to shut down any bill that benefited animals. So I think it's important that we have as much communication as we can, because we don't know how our actions are necessarily influencing each other. And so for those of us who are working in state legislature and kind of have to go with the flow, know what we're able to pass in what political environment, sometimes big, flashy, direct actions can actually knock, a bill off course. But then I also understand that people get frustrated because bills don't go far enough, and we want to see something more comprehensive. I'm working on a bill right now that would provide It would mandate that laboratories adopt dogs and cats who have been tested on rather than killing them after the experiment. Like pretty basic, right? You think that that would be a real easy sell. Well, it's not. It's not, it's difficult. The bill didn't pass for 2 years because it was in a committee with a chair who didn't believe in it. And also from our community, there's a lot of criticism. Why aren't you just banning animal testing altogether? Believe me, I wish that it was something that could be addressed, but we have to work within the political climate that we're in, and we have to educate legislators and make them care about these issues before we can make changes. So we do the best that we can when we can. So for those of you who needed just a little bit of a refresher, this is the general process for passing legislation here, well, in Michigan, but everywhere. So a legislator gets an idea, they draft a bill, the bill is assigned, it's introduced, it's assigned to a committee, the committee votes on it, then it's voted on by the entire chamber, whether that's the House or the Senate, and then you do the exact same thing in the opposite. But what I do want to point out is that while citizens can get ideas for bills, it's often lobbying groups that provide the language and the idea for bills to elected officials. So it's important to recognize that the special interests are often providing this bill language. I mean, people would consider a lot of animal advocacy groups to be a special interest as well. So, you know, we're always, someone's going to think of us as their enemy. So, you know, I might provide a bill idea based on the priorities for my organization. Another animal group might provide a bill idea based on their priorities. They don't always agree, but there's this whole behind the scenes process before a bill is even introduced that involves drafting, consulting with stakeholder groups, et cetera. And that's another reason it's so important to get to know your elected officials, because if you have a good relationship with them, it's very possible that they'll ask you about the draft that they are going to introduce as well, if they know you. They might say, what do you think about this? You're the animal person in my district. I'm thinking of, I don't know, banning factory farms in our district. What do you think about that? And you could read the bill and say, yeah, absolutely, sure. So in Michigan, we, every state's different, by the way. Every state has a different kind of legislature. So our legislature meets for 2 years consecutively. Some states it's only, 3 months, 6 months, but in Michigan it's for 2 years. And they have several breaks. There's a spring break, a summer break, the first day of hunting break. Yes, that's a thing. And then over the holidays, you have a senator and a representative. And then as far as other folks that you can talk to and use these lobbying skills, you also have city and county officials and federal elected officials. And then you also have, somebody had asked in the Vegan Detroit group today about the managers of companies, right? Like how do I get a company policy changed? You can use the exact same kind of, you know, techniques, right? Repeated communication, building a relationship, sharing information, sharing scientific studies, public opinion polls, et cetera. So you can really use those lobbying skills of educating people with, you know, anybody in a decision-making position. And there's also a difference between what you see as the process and, you know, that diagram we just looked at and what's really going on behind the scenes. So usually when a bill comes up in committee, you know, it's going to pass, and it's going to pass because the bill's sponsor, the committee chair, and whatever lobbying groups are interested in that bill have already discussed who's going to vote how. And sometimes the constituents are involved because someone will ask them to call their representative and ask them to vote yes on a bill, et cetera. But usually by the time a bill is up in a committee, the decision-making is already done. It's going to be passed through that committee. And so, I mean, I know that it's a little bit disheartening because it feels like you might not have a voice. It's just, that's the reason we've got to emphasize getting involved before the hearing happens. And yes, like maybe if it gets through committee and it gets to say the Senate floor, you might have the influence to just call tons of senators and have it not pass. And they'll say they'll kill the bill. But you don't want it to get to that point. And when I got this job, it was suggested I read, The Art of War right? And you want to fight the smallest battle that you can. You don't want the bill to get all the way to the governor's desk and have to like do a Hail Mary and try to get a veto. You want to talk to the people who know you in the Senate, in the House, and explain to them person to person why this isn't a good idea. And that can only happen if you have those relationships set up. So there is a lot that goes on behind the scenes, and it's just so important to recognize that that we don't always see the moving parts. We don't know the conversations that are going on between elected officials. Maybe somebody says, you know, I'll vote for this bill if you'll vote for this bill, and there's some kind of trade going on. So while we may not be privy to the very, very inner circle, it's best that we try to establish those relationships and get as close as we can. So I'm here as a resource. I know B is here as a resource. I'm going to volunteer you. If you ever need help with any of this, with lobbying, with coalition building, et cetera. And so I'm going to say that your best tool is togetherness and community. And I think that our community of animal advocates in the state of Michigan is just among the best in the country. When we're not disagreeing with each other over really petty things, okay? And that's the key. I think we have to recognize what opportunities there are and not let perfect be the enemy of good or be the enemy of done. And that's really hard, especially for those of us who have really deep convictions about how things should be. You know, if you have really strong feelings about animal agriculture in its entirety and wish that it, you know, didn't exist at all, or that there was no hunting ever at all, or no dog breeding ever at all, you know, like we know those things aren't ever going to happen. We have to stay grounded in reality. But if we look at the bills that are coming up, and if we look at the potential, like who has expressed interest in these causes and what they might be willing to work towards as far as ending what I think, you know, the most egregious forms of cruelty, where you have a lot of public support, then we can just work to make the world a more humane place, right? Most people don't support puppy mills. Most people don't support trophy hunting. Most people really don't like the way that animals are treated on factory farms. And we can find a lot of common ground without having to have everything be perfect. It's hard enough to get a bill introduced. It's even harder to get the ball rolling on making some progress with it. And so making sure that we are flexible and trying to do the best that we can is the best that we can do. And if we are together instead of at each other's throats, that's even better. Because let me tell you, most of these folks, they don't know the difference between Humane Society of the United States, Michigan Humane, whatever your local Humane Society is. They think they're all connected. They think that a rescue and a shelter are the same thing. They think a farm sanctuary is like probably like really outlying. They have no idea that there are so many and that they're so popular in the state. So building coalitions so that we speak with one voice, especially if the coalition members are from a ton of different districts spread across the state, is going to help build support for whatever initiative there is. And so I'm including this awesome coalition that we did earlier this year, where there was a bad bill that was encouraging a 2021 wolf hunt. There's no reason to have a wolf hunt in this year. I could do a whole presentation on wolves, but all of these incredible organizations from across the spectrum in animal welfare, farm sanctuaries, wildlife organizations, cat and dog rescues, I mean, everybody came together and agreed to sign this letter asking that this bill be opposed. And unfortunately, because of all of the influence and the kind of behind the scenes stuff, they didn't listen. They didn't listen. But what we have is a record of a lot of organizations opposing this kind of cruelty to animals. And that is something that we can build from, that we can grow from, and that we can use to strengthen our community and the political involvement of our community. So the more we communicate with each other, the more we talk about our priorities, the more we talk about what we'd like to see and ask each other to support, the better, right? Because what's the worst someone's going to say is no, and hopefully have a good reason for it. But the more we can be collaborative, the better it works for us and for the animals. Ultimately, we want this to be a process that benefits the animals so that the animals of our state are treated kindly, respectfully, and are free from pain. So I would just invite you, and I'm a person who does not like public speaking. This is fine. I know a lot of you. I don't really like I'll admit it, it's like not one of my strengths, public speaking. And so it was really difficult for me to not just talk about the issues, but to have that confrontation about the issues, to call an elected official, to call somebody who I, was scared of. So, make the call, attend the meeting, get out of your comfort zone, ask how you can help. Here's a list of folks who really need to hear from you. Your state, your representatives, the Department of Agriculture, Department of Natural Resources, et cetera. And then I would say that these are some of the tools that have helped me overcome my fear or avoidance. And I know I'm going over a little bit, Olivia, so I want to make sure I wrap it up soon. And we have a time to listen to a couple testimonies, but don't procrastinate, just do it quickly, because the more you procrastinate, the more you're gonna convince yourself you don't have to do it, that somebody else is gonna do it. Recruit an accountability partner. If you're afraid that you're not knowledgeable enough about the issue, just study it. You can study it, or look it up, or ask somebody. You can always call me or some of our other very knowledgeable advocates in the state. Do your research on the person you're calling, because these are just people. They're just because they hold a position of power, it doesn't mean they're better than you. It doesn't mean they're more educated than you. They just happen to be an elected official. You probably know more about your issue than they do. Remind yourself, this isn't a field where we have having all those speakers the other night took an enormous amount of work. Assume you're going to be the only one who speaks up for the animals and you're going to be their voice. Let go of the outcome. You can't change people, places, or things. All you can say is your truth and what needs to be said for the animals. So don't get discouraged if it doesn't immediately result in change. Just your presence there is going to be uncomfortable for the other side. And then I would just say reward yourself afterwards, because it's very stressful, and share your success with others in the community. And I recommend videotaping yourself. Oh my God, I just aged myself. Just record yourself on your phone. And I like to share my testimony so that people can see how easy it is. And not only can they see when there's a good reaction from an elected official, but they can see what it sounds like and how uninformed, rude, and contrary to the kindness and compassion that we want to cultivate when you have people who are not kind, who are not compassionate in these positions of power. And people really respond to that. I mean, I had a 15-minute sparring match with a senator who was trying just to get under my skin about wolves. It was uncalled for, and it was intense, and it was even commented on in an article in the paper. And when you see that, don't worry, it probably won't happen to you because it'll be directed at me with a big organization. But just know that when they act like that and the public sees it, they're seeing their true colors, and you're still eliciting a response that shows why being compassionate, why speaking up for the animals is the kindest option, and usually the most corroborated by science and public values. So Olivia, do we have a minute to show one or two testimonies?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. So I wanted to share, I just wanted to share a couple of testimonies and comments that people have given over the past couple of months that I thought were really exceptional. And these are folks who have never, well, one, I'm going to start with someone who's never done it before. This is my friend Ruth, and she wanted to speak up on behalf of bears at the Natural Resources Commission. And she just did a beautiful job. And look how simple it was. It's less than 2 minutes long. And all she did was just give her experience.
And this is my first time testifying in front of the commission. I am a small business owner, Michigan native, mom, and avid wildlife watcher and advocate. I'm looking forward to teaching my son to be a good steward of the land who respects animals and the environment. I recently read the NRC's decision to limit the use of bait barrels on DNR managed land. I want to thank you for making that decision. Explaining to a 6-year-old that people lure bears to large barrels full of human food for the purposes of shooting them has been difficult for me as a parent. Children ask a lot of questions. They tend to focus on fairness. At the end of the day, bear baiting has been one of those heartbreaking subjects that has exposed my son to a level of cruelty he did not previously understand. This is not a fair practice. This is not sporting and is not part of the value system that I want my family to embody. These values include kindness, respect, and mercy. I hope that the NRC and DNR continue to consider limits on bear baiting. Our bears deserve better. My son deserves better. And all of our children deserve better. Thank you for your time.
Amazing. It was so simple, right? But so scary, because who knows what the NRC is? It's not easy to find out about. It's usually all hunters who attend, a lot of whom are defending the practices that we oppose, leg hold traps, bear baiting, trophy hunting of wolves, sandhill cranes. Most of the meetings are in person, which is so intimidating. It used to be that maybe just me, I was the only one speaking up for animals, and it was very intimidating to do that. And they're not going to hold remote meetings anymore. Why? Because it's they said they'll look into it. It's much easier to have these meetings when they know who's going to be showing up to do comments, right? And a lot more people were able to comment when it was remote. So that's why it's so important that we show up. I'll give one more example. I'm going to fast forward to the end. This is testimony that I gave to the NRC. You can give it, here's an example of just the kind of questions you get. I spent the entire thing, by the way, talking about how we need a nuanced conversation about the kinds of hunting practices we allow in Michigan, because the public agrees and doesn't necessarily condemn subsistence hunting. But when it comes to trophy hunting, trapping, baiting, etc., we need to consider cutting those out. They do not fit within our wildlife management. So here's the question that I was asked. The best decisions to conserve our land. Let's see.
Their families.
As I said, it's different than, yeah, of course. No longer represents expert consensus on the minimum population size necessary for the long-term health and survival of the population. And we'd be happy to provide those studies anytime. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Molly. Are you not open to the reality that most hunters, if not all hunters, hunt for the meat to help sustain themselves and their families?
As I said, it's different than, yeah, of course. I don't believe that people are eating wolf meat, though, or the meat of the coyotes who are killed in killing contests. We're talking about trophy hunters, which is distinct from subsistence hunters.
Okay, well, and I'll also say that we all descend from hunters, whether in our recent past or in our ancient history. The human species would not have been able to sustain itself for the many thousands of years we've been around without hunting.
Right, with all due respect, Chair Rose, I distinctly said in my first paragraph that this is not an anti-hunting organization. This is the cruelest practices that have fallen out of favor publicly and are used as trophy hunting, not subsistence hunting.
All right, thank you.
Muted.
Chair Rose, I had a
Muted. This is the level of discussion that's going on, okay? So there's me looking delighted because it's like, what else are you gonna do, right? I mean, you give science, you give values, and you get that kind of a response. And this is an appointed official who is one of 7 people in the state who has the authority to designate if an animal is a game species, how they are hunted, what the hunting season is. And everything about them. They're not beholden to constituents, and that's the level of discourse that you get when you show up citing scientific studies. And so I would just say, this is really necessary for us to get involved in, because how we have a long way to go to not only make change, but to earn some respect. That's not the way that that's just not the way that you should be treated. And that's not a caliber of response that's reflective of the care that went into that testimony. And so I would say, yes, it's intimidating. Yes, it can be obnoxious. And they're probably going to be more upset with someone like me, who represents an organization contrary to their interests, than they are to somebody who says, this is my first time doing this. I just want to share my opinion, like my friend Ruth, who shared about bear baiting. So I would just say, think about these things. Think of it as maybe a shift that you take every 6 months for the animals. Develop these relationships. There are a couple of bills in the works. The first that I mentioned that would have encourage the adoption of dogs and cats used in research. One here that would modify the definition of shelter. So it would ban the use of plastic barrels as year-round shelter, and it would also require that outdoor shelters have a floor, pretty bare minimum stuff. I mean, we're working with what we have, which is pretty low standards, right? And opposition, they want to change this bill so that plastic barrels can be allowed, because why? A lot of hunting groups keep their dogs in plastic barrels outside. And so again, it's an issue of who has access to legislators and who has the lobbying power. If every single one of us reached out and talked to them, that might sway the balance. But if we don't have enough people talking about it, we won't make any change. The same here with wolf hunt. Wolf hunt, one of the most politically polarizing issues out there right now. We are always trying to protect our wolves. I'm more than happy to provide resources for you, but there's a bad bill speeding through the legislature, trying to allow only Upper Peninsula residents to have input on wolf issues. We have a long way to go. I'll just say that. So please, if you're interested in these issues, stay engaged. You can like our HSUS Michigan Facebook page, respond and share to our action alerts, stay in touch with your legislators, push your own agenda, ideas, share with them, create a coalition, make friends accountable, do it together. And if you want to talk to me one-on-one, feel free to schedule an email or figure out a time to chat. I'm more than happy to talk about this. And that is it.
Thank you so much, Molly. That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing your expertise and all of your experience with us. So if anyone else has any more questions, feel free to add them to the chat right now. It looks like we do have a couple so far. The first one asked if you could address how to write papers and articles on policy analysis if you're not a student or a researcher.
So policy analysis for what purpose? Like, is this to kind of disseminate for the news media, or is this more like you just want to understand a bill better?
I am not sure.
Okay, yeah, if you could clarify, because I mean, I'm not a policy analysis expert and I'm not a lawyer. So what I usually do is if I see a bill, I usually pass the bill along to someone I know who is a lawyer, like the folks at Attorneys for Animals, and have them take a look at it. And then I'll run it by like folks on my team who have an understanding of the law. And then we kind of see who the sponsor is, or I'll send my lobbyist to say, hey, who's behind this? Is this like a good thing? Is this a bad thing? And just kind of, but it's so important to translate from that legalese into something that's easily accessible to the average person.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Okay, Nat says, do you have any experience with increasing vegan options at school lunches?
We do. So we have a plant-based food program at HSUS that works a lot with distributors. So food distributor companies, Sodexo, et cetera. But if you want resources for how to approach a particular school, you can email me and I can put you in touch with our farm animal protection team, because they do a lot of culinary training. And I actually, Angie has helped organize that too. So she would, I mean, she knows all about it. And I would just, if it's somebody that you have a relationship with, just talk to them. There's so much research out there now about the health benefits of a plant-based diet, as well as the benefits of a plant-based diet for creating kind of like equity for the environment, there are all kinds of reasons, and there's so many scholarly articles and kind of more accessible articles available that if you and a couple other parents maybe got together and wrote a letter, that might be helpful, but we're happy to help.
Someone said, has being vegan ever been used against you during campaigning?
Not yet. But I don't lead with it. I don't talk about it. I don't, vegan tends to carry more of a political, I mean, you all know this, but it carries with it kind of like an intensity, a political intensity. So while like I would identify as vegan, I don't talk about it usually. Like it's not, that joke about like how do you tell someone's vegan? Or don't worry, they'll tell you right away. I've moved out. I've like trained myself not to. But when people ask me, I always talk about the environment, the animals, and the health. I give a well-rounded approach to why I made that choice. And I also say, like I said, I'll tell them, why are you surprised? I work in animal welfare. Why wouldn't I be? I said, we are remarkably consistent. I'm consistent in my values. I'll always speak up for the animals. Why wouldn't I do it in my personal life too? I never push it, but I don't back away from it either.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Okay, let me see. Do you have any recommendations on how we can talk to other people to encourage them to get involved with policy change as well? Maybe other people who are also believe in animal rights or anything else, any other issue?
That's a good question too. I mean, I can't even get my own, this is being recorded. I can't even get my own family to call most of the time. So I don't know, like if you have the secret, tell me. But I do think that, I think most people care. Most people want more compassion instead of less compassion. Most people, if given the choice to inflict some kind of violence on an animal or not, they're going to choose not to. And I think it's hard we only have a certain amount of bandwidth in every day. And most people don't want to see something painful. They don't want to see something sad. So I'll often use the personal connection card and say, hey, this is really important to me. Can you listen about this issue? Or I'll share an article. Or I found that sharing when I testify or provide comment, people see my face, they know who I am in my social media networks, your friends, your family, et cetera, they're connected to you on Facebook, and somehow that algorithm picks up on your faces. And so people like to click on videos of people that they know. And so when you share what you've said and people hear you either being, kind of disrespected or dismissed, or they hear your message from your own mouth, they're inspired because it's you saying it, not a news outlet saying it. So I think that you're kind of the best carrier of that message, and social media can be really useful that way. My 2 cents.
That's a very good point. Absolutely. I would definitely agree with that. Okay, I was just curious, how can we stay up to date on new issues to get involved in Michigan and find people who are working on them? I know you shared some of the things that people are working on right now, but as new things come up, do you have any recommendations on how to stay up to what we can work in?
Yeah, well, I really think Attorneys for Animals does an amazing job, and B does these lunch and learn sessions every week, which are very interesting. And so I would follow Attorneys for Animals and familiarize yourself with their legislative tracker. And then I usually post, if there are any updates on bills that are priorities, like for HSUS, on our HSUS Michigan. I might have included that, but I'll send it send it again. So our HSUS Michigan site does that. Oops, video, sorry. but those are, I mean, those are kind of the two organizations that regularly update about the issues. And if there's something that you care about that's outside of the scope of what HSUS does, because we have like very specific priority initiatives, just go to Attorneys for Animals. They do everything.
Absolutely. When you said follow Attorneys for Animals, are you talking about on social media, like on Facebook?
Yeah,
What
on
would be-
Facebook.
On Facebook?
Yeah,
Okay.
and feel free to unmute, and if there's anything else, you can sign up for the newsletter as well, right, B?
Yes, what I did, I just posted the link to our resources page, which has the updated legislative tracker, which is monthly updated, and our Facebook page and newsletter. You can find that on the on our website.
Okay,
Thanks,
great.
Molly.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, B. Thanks for sharing.
Angie had a question. I don't know if that.
Oh yeah, go for it.
So she said, what types of issues do you bring to your city council members versus your state senators and reps? Do you bring, for example, the wolf issue to your city rep? That's a great question, because the scope of what a city, county, and state can do, and obviously federal, it's different. We have kind of specific ordinances that we tend to work with local governments on. One of which is the prohibition on the retail sale of puppies, which helps shut down the puppy mill to pet store supply chain. We suggest resolutions for Meatless Monday, which is something you can do. I mean, a resolution doesn't carry a lot of weight, right? But it's still a nice thing to have on the books. We do support ordinances that prohibit the sale of new fur products, which would be really nice to take off here in Michigan. And a lot of the time when you have a state whose state government is not as inclined to help on animal issues, we rely on local governments to do that. So, I mean, it would be great to see a statewide prohibition on retail puppy sales. It would be great to see a state prohibition on the sale of new fur products. They're all coming from, I mean, especially with the link between fur and COVID, which is so dangerous. That's not an industry that we want to promote. But unfortunately, sometimes you need to build the local issues first. So those are a couple of the things that we work on.
Absolutely. Okay, it looks like just the last question is Nat says, I'm in Florida. Are you aware of any groups currently doing similar work here?
Yeah, HQS is in Florida. Yeah, you have a state director in Florida. I would, and her name's Kate McFall, and she, I'm sure, runs the HSUS Florida page so that you can find out about legislative updates there. I actually went down there when you banned greyhound racing a few years ago and stood at the polls to help encourage folks to support that proposition. And you did a great job, all of you Floridians, in voting that out. So that was very exciting. But yep, she's your lady, and you can just Google HSUS Florida and find her contact information.
Great. I'm so glad you knew of someone. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, it looks like that is all the questions we have, and we're a little over time. Everyone says thank you so much, Molly. That was wonderful. And thank you so much from us at VegMichigan as well for taking the time to talk with us in our community tonight. It was really great. And another reminder, this will be on YouTube if you want to revisit any of this wonderful information Molly shared. I don't know if you have anything else to say.
No, thanks everyone. Feel free to reach out if you want to start doing something in your community. It's always so great to talk to other advocates. I mean, 16 of you on a Thursday night, that's amazing.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Have a wonderful night, everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye.
Take care.